Go ahead, Sangeeta.
You're there?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Little one more, yeah. Just give me a little one more. All right. So good morning, everyone. So welcome to today's topic on courageous conversation. How to speak up about issues that weighing you down. All right. So today we have Hani, our career doctor. So before all that, all right. So just to share a little bit about Emerging Journey Asia. So what we do is we are a talent development company where we look at, individual potential, and we are also a mental health advocate for organization, for individual, and those who need some assistance. Yeah. So we in our workshops, in our talk, in our training, we always incorporate psychological aspect because we believe, you will not be able to function at a satisfactory level if your mental health is not checked. All right. So with the conversation today, what we have is courageous conversation. All right. So you have Hani. So we call her the career doctor. Okay. So she's the co-founder of Dragonfire Corporate Solution. She have more than 20 years. Okay. So she look at organization effectiveness, change management, courageous conversation, talent and career management. Okay. Hani is also Emergenetics Associate. The framework that we're going to use today based on Emergenetics framework, which I'm going to share a little bit more. All right. She is also a certified trainer from HRDF. All right. Pearson BTEC level 5 qualification. Okay. And Marshall Goldsmith stakeholder centered coaching. She's also a coach and stress pad business coach. And then you have me, Sangeeta, the founder of Emerging Journey Asia and the CEO of Emergenetics Malaysia, right? And Brunei. All right. So we organized Malaysia's first mental health experiential conference last year because mental health is part of your life. You cannot put that aside. Just as physical health, mental health plays a role. And why do we create this awareness is because we want to educate and create awareness for employers and employees that mental health important in your productivity, performance, sustainability, and overall organization culture. All right. So if you have any question, feel free to ask us. All right. If you don't want a face-to-face, you can always text. And if you feel that during the session, you might feel, triggered by the words that we say or by the participants here, feel free to take a break. All right. And if you need to privately message us, you can do. Okay. All right. So we have, anything, Hani, that you would like to add before I go to Emergenetics framework?
No, not yet, Sangeeta. I think the floor is still yours.
Okay. All right. So just to start with, what is courageous conversation, that Hani will manage that. So just to explain about Emergenetics. Okay, Emergenetics is a psychometric assessment that looks into individual personality. All right. We look at 7 attributes, 4 from the thinking, analytical, structural, social, conceptual, and 3 from the behavior, expressive, assertive, and flexibility. So emergenetics is actually patterns of thinking and behaving that emerge from your genetic blueprint and your life experiences. So who you are today based on your DNA, based on your parents, your great-great-parents, grandparents, and all that. And also your life experiences. So all of us today are different. Okay, we can come from a same family unit, but because of our engagement in school, our society, our experience, our studies, it makes all of us different, even though we are in the same family unit. So you need to understand that. And emergenetics is developed by Dr. Wendell William and Dr. Gail Browning from the US, and it's been there for more than 25 years. We are global, we have many different languages. All right. So if you need more information on emergenetics, can always buzz us later. You know, at the end of the session, we will show you, we will share our contact details. All right. So, Honey, anything else?
Hey, nope, this is good.
Okay. Up to you now, Honey. Continue.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, guys. As I heard from Sangeeta, I would like to invite all of you, those of you who are comfortable enough to switch on your video. You can do that right now. I think simply because it'll make us more feel like we're talking to to all of you instead me and just Sangeeta alone. So don't worry if you don't have your makeup on. As long as you guys are decent, that's fine. That's fine to us. Okay, so just coming back to Sangeeta, can I just go back to the courageous conversation slide, please?
Boleh, boleh. Yes. Okay,
so courageous conversation. So the basis of courageous conversation we're going to talk about today is about how we need to create that courageous or build that guts, basically, to talk about something difficult. And difficult conversations may sound ranging from managing performance. If you're a leader, you're managing performance of your teamwork, or between friends who may have to talk about something difficult, something sensitive, or between parent and children, for example, which is very, very useful. However, in a lot of contexts that we're going to discuss today, is about how our leaders and individual contributors at work, where they will find themselves often in situations where they have to talk to their team members and colleagues in a very candid way, and have that courageous conversation on what do you call that, on sensitive topics. And any other engagement that requires you to express your views objectively with no high emotion involved. So those of you who have recognized some patterns in having that courageous conversation, I think will be very, very useful to find out that I'm going to walk you through very briefly on the 6 steps on how to have that courageous conversation. So, one example that have been posed to me many times over in this courageous conversation is how to tell the other person about body odor, for example, or bad breath, or bad stinky feet, for example. So that's one courageous conversation. You're supposed to share what's your thought to the other person and how to manage that well without having high emotion involved between both parties. Yeah, I think Sangeeta, we've talked a lot about this courageous conversation for the past many months, and I think that's the reason why we. Oh yes, Lina, BO issue at workplace, very, very common. Thanks, Sangeeta. Can we go to the next slide, please?
Boleh. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so maybe you want to just quickly go through in terms of the thinking preferences before we go into the actual stuff.
Okay, so if you courageous conversation has what Hani mentioned about, how do you reply or respond or say something to the other individual, right? Mm-hmm. So most of the time, right, whatever that we say or how we listen or how we process information is based on our personality. All right. So if we feel that this approach is correct, we assume that everyone need to follow the same approach. We assume that you need to know that this approach is correct, it's workable, right? How to convey messages, so this approach is correct, but we need to understand that everyone is different. So for example, like Hani mentioned, how do you talk to someone, or how do you convey those messages if someone have BO, right? So if you look at the emergentics thinking preferences, all right, we have the analytical, all right? So analytical is someone who prefers to give you data, who prefers to explain about facts, about figures, all right? So if that person, if you have analytical has your preferences, you may want to tell this individual, you know, for the past week, you have this BO for this number of time, or this duration. You know, this is how you will convey that message. So you will straight away go into the data instead of building that relationship, or talk in the manner that, you know, to have that PR. Because for you, this doesn't make sense. I'm going to tell you in a week, you know, I smell you, I can smell you, this, and this is not pleasant. And maybe those who have thinking preferences, which is more, that means higher, what you will do is you will start to give some statistics. All right. So this is how analytical prefers to convey or communicate with others. They prefer facts, they prefer data, they prefer statistics, they prefer things that is validated. All right. So now we are going to structural. Structural is individual who prefers step-by-step guidance, who prefers to do things according to a process, who prefers to do things, you know, when there's a start, they make sure there's an end. All right. So people, how do you convey message? If I have this structural preference, how do I convey this message to someone who have BO, right? So in my mind, okay, I might use words like, you know, we have been together, and I'm with you while talking, and I noticed that during this time, you know, when it's hot, you feel, you know, while you're sweaty, there's some smell coming out from you. Okay. So you will go through a process, a structured process. You put it in word by word so that you get your message out there. So can you see the difference? For structural, they prefer detailed information. For analytical, it's just quick. Hey, you smell, you know, in this week you are this number of time I can smell you, and you must do something about it and all that stuff. But structure, they give you a detail of your flow. Okay. So when it comes to social, social is someone, oh, Mas Lina, ya ke? You dari structural, you suka that approach? Okay, coming from social preference, social is individual who prefers a big group or a small group. Okay, so for them, it's all about relationship. You know, they are afraid to voice out because they are afraid to spoil the relationship that they have with that person. So rather than say it out, they just keep it. But in their mind, it's like, oh my God, this person is so smelly, I can't stand it. But they don't really want to voice it out. Okay. If their preference is at first third behavior, which we're going to go later. All right. And then when we come to conceptual, conceptual is someone who prefers ideas, who prefers to think big, who think out of the box. All right. So these are the 4 thinking preference in emergentics that we would share on issues. So when we come to courageous conversation, right, different thinking attributes looks at it differently, and some of them would just say it, or some would just keep it because they don't want to spoil the relationship. Right? Any questions so far? No? Okay. So, Hani, Do you want to go to the next one?
Yep, just stay on the slide. I just wanted to, share a quick example of any one of this thinking preferences has worked against a person. For example, if you are more driven by social thinking preferences, where a relationship really matters to you. I mean, of course, all of us want to have a good relationship, but sometimes what will hamper you in telling our friend the truth about this body odor, for example, is a social bit. It might potentially work against you, and that's the reason why sometimes you will hear a friend going about the bush. They just go around the bush without going straight into what bothers them. Yes, and I agree with you, Cynthia. Some people may not be able to accept it, and that's the reason why we need to understand what and how we can do this, because it's part of the courageous conversation. Now, remember this: it is not about what you say, but it's about how you say it. And once you have mastered the steps of having courageous conversation, you'll be able to talk about almost anything in the world, on anything, with anyone, even to your mother-in-law or your father-in-law. Trust me. And all these steps will be very, very useful. Okay, so what we're going to walk through with all of you later on is just a few quick steps, but at the end of the day, it's all about practicing it, because practice makes perfect. Sangeeta, can we just go to the next slide?
Yeah, just to add on,
Yeah.
You need to make sure that that's nothing, you don't take things too personal.
Yes.
You need to understand, from the thinking preferences, you can see that there's a diverse in the way of people think. And sometimes what you say might not be acceptable, or maybe the way they respond to you is different. So that is why you need to make sure that whenever there's a reply, you don't take it too personal, because when you have then you create unnecessary conflict, not to your friends, to your colleague, to your bosses, to everyone else. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in this context, we're going to walk through in the context of addressing a certain issue. For example, the body odor. We'll stick to body odor because it seems that based on my experience, Sangeeta, I've chosen this issue of body odor because of all the hundreds of workshops that I've run on courageous conversation. It seems that body odor comes top. Because it's kind of difficult, they can talk about performance appraisal, so it is high on top of the list, but it seems that to talk about body odor is so unpleasant that people just refuse to address it. They rather suffer. Lina, I'm reading your message here. I would prefer to suffer with BO because I don't want to hurt people until I cannot stand it. And then what? It's just terrible. Before I run through the 6 steps, guys, I just wanted to share something very interesting. Many years ago, I was heading a recruitment organization where we actually see a lot of candidates coming in every day. So our interview room was this small cubicle where, where no one else from outside can hear. There was one morning, one guy came in right through the rain. It was raining outside, so he came in and said that I wanted to apply for this job. And I said, okay, so fill up the form and please come into our interview room. Now, here's the thing. Most likely, this young guy was so oblivious to what, number one, his body odor smell like. And topping it off, he had stinky socks. So it's all bundled together and he stank to high heavens. I have a good feeling that he wasn't aware of of his own condition. And I'm wondering whether should I tell him? Should I not? Should I tell him? Should I not? Because knowing for a fact that we're going to go into this small room, I would die. That's how bad he smelled. But I figured that it takes a little bit of courage to tell him or to alert him or highlight to him that, hey, you know, we have a situation here, and I would like to point out to you this. So it was my very first story that I could remember how Courageous Conversation framework came about, and it's been fine-tuned over the years, and so far it has worked. So I would like to share this so that we all can live harmoniously. Okay, so yes,
Just to
Sangeeta.
add also, not only body odor ke feet odor,
Yeah.
but those who apply perfume banyak sangat.
Ya, yang over sebotol keluar. We do not want to offend, obviously, but as I mentioned, it's not about what you say, but it's about how you say it. And the framework that I've used over the past 6 years is internalizing what my responses to certain situation is, what are my triggers, and what comes out from my mouth and the behavior that I'm demonstrating whenever I have this courageous conversation. We all have our flip side on the day, and it's very, very important to understand how we respond to certain triggers so that we can manage that conversation. I think internalization is very important before we go into the 6 steps of managing this courageous conversation. So Sangeeta, allow me to walk through fairly quickly on the 6 steps. So basically what we need to have is to get things started well. We do not want to have courageous conversation talking about something so crucial at the water cooler when the other person has only a split second to pay attention to you. We need to set the stage right. For example, if that person is fairly busy in the morning, that's not a good time. We may want to really prepare the conversation well. We need to plan. So all of this will be successful if we plan carefully, because it is so important. That's the reason why you want to have these courageous conversations, right? If it's not so important, then any time is a good time. But because this is such a crucial subject that you want to address, you need to make plan. And getting started means you need to make sure the timing is right and not rushed. For example, you may not want to catch this person while this person is in a hurried manner, you know, on the way to a meeting, something like that. No, make sure that you actually send out an invite. For example, hey Ahmad, are you free for a quick coffee this afternoon, for example? And if that person says, oh no, I'm kind of rushed, so it may not be the right time. You want to make sure the other person who's receiving this feedback to be in the right frame of mind. And you yourself have to prepare in terms of scripting it out right. Remember, if you're an analytical person and has the tendency to just say, hey, you know what, Ahmad, I think you smell, it's not going to work. We need to prepare ourselves as well. So the opening statement, which is the second step, is very, very important, Sangeeta, the opening statement. And for Malays, I think there's another word for it, the mukadimah, okay, the opening statement, the introduction to it. We cannot just simply say, hey, you smell. That's not opening statement. We want to make sure that the opening statement is kind enough, is gentle enough. We make use of a technique called sandwich technique, where you have sandwich, bread, whatever goodies you have, and another bread. So what we're going to do is the opening statement will be the first layer of the sandwich, where you know will be great buffers for this tough conversation, because you know that the topic is going to be tough. So you need to buffer that with kindness. So the next step is creating the story. Remove all emotion when you start creating the story. We cannot say, hey, a lot of people in this office is not happy with you. So that's emotion. We will steer away from saying, I feel so sad when I see you coming in, because I know I'm going to have a bad day because of your body odor. That's not creating a story. Stick to facts. And that's the reason why it's very important to write it down, step 1, 2, 3, and 4, so that you can be focused only on the subject that matter most at that point of time, which is the issue. So we're not going to talk about high emotion. We're not going to talk about everyone else. We're going to talk about that particular item, not even personal attack, because it's not about the other person. It's about the issue that this person has something that we're going to address. So that's creating the story. A lot of courageous conversations, Sangeeta, fail at that point between the opening statement and creating the story. They just go boom, and that's it. It just goes down the hill. They'll be shouting match, and they say, I don't care about this, and they walk away. No resolve.
Yeah, I second that, because it's a fine line between, you know, the story that you have in your mind, the facts, and also the emotion, because we are so attached to emotion. And if it's different or you feel unpleasant, that's where it will drain you, and whatever that you plan from getting started, opening statement, and creating your story will just go bonkers because of emotion. So we need to address this.
Yeah, you'll just go offline, of course, if you are a person who's driven by conceptual, for example, or social, for example, the script is more important than anything else, because the fear of offending the other person is so high that you tend to beat about the bush. You will talk about things that happens in Ipoh, in Kota Baru, before you get to Johor Bahru. So you go everywhere first without addressing the real issue in hand. So it's best that you write it down, take a look at it, and assess a few times whether to see whether the script that you have, which is the third part, creating the story, makes sense. Are we addressing the right issue? Do we have emotions involved into this conversation? So all of this needs to take into consideration. So the next one is active listening, which is step number 4. Active listening is also very crucial, because human being, due to the formative years, we have been trained to quickly create a script inside our head whenever another person is talking to us. So there's always that form responses inside our head. It takes a little bit of retraining to quickly remove this and to be present whenever we hear the feedback from the other person. So active listening is very, very crucial. And of course, the next one, step 5, speaking with clarity and conviction. What does this mean? Sangeeta, in my past experience, what I've been observing is that whenever there's a simple, not simple, there's major issues to address, performance, for example, and a few other sensitive topics, the other person may have issues in speaking out with clarity. Why? Because there's emotions involved. Again, preparation is very important, and we have to make sure that we address only the portion of the issue and not about everything else. And it takes courage, number 1, and it takes preparation, number 2, and it takes internalization about how we respond to certain things. Very, very important. I'm looking at Pratibhan's note here. Beating about the bush, yes, but starting my third year uni. Okay. Thanks, Pratibhan. That's really cute. Yeah, sometimes we have to take enough courage, build enough courage to speak about sensitive issues like this. I think very important for us to always self-check on what is the reason why we're going to have this courageous conversation. Where does that come from? There are only two possibilities. Number one is to make sure we're fixing the wrong to right. Or number two, are we doing this out of spite or hatred? You need to check on your intention. Remember, getting started is to start thinking about the scripting, but we also need to check on why are we doing this. So either it comes from the goodness of your heart or it comes from the dark side of your heart. You need to know where it comes from, because out of whatever that comes out from either of these two intentions will dictate on the wordings that come out from you, the message that comes out from you, and the behavior that you're going to project against the other person. Yeah. Okay, Aaron has a question here, Sangeeta. What if it comes out of bad intention? Then the courageous conversation is not at the right place already. The bad intention may sound like I'm going to do this because I'm going to hurt this person by putting down a person. So my question to anyone who has this perspective, bad intention, is why do you want to do that? The world is such a beautiful place. Why do you want to spoil it with bad intention? Something to think about.
All right, just to add on that, right? As Hani went through that steps from getting started and all that, through that you can evaluate what the intention that you try to portray or you have at the moment, because you need to understand everything that you do, there's a consequences, right? So if you have a bad intention, then you will receive that kind of consequences. But if you have good intention, you will have some other consequences, right? So always look at it, and then you need to evaluate. Okay, maybe remember that I said earlier, everyone comes from different thinking preference. Okay, for you, you think that that approach is the right approach, but the receiver might take it in a different approach. So that is why the opening statement is very important. Rather than you just jump into the conclusion and say, right, your opening statement. And another thing that you need to look out, it's instead of blaming that person, and we like to blame others, we like to pinpoint others. We always say, no, you are this, you are that, maybe you should do this. Change the word, because the moment you rephrase it, the moment you change the words, it's nicer. Which one would you do more? Someone who blame you and then you will rebel, or someone who put it in the right way, say that we should discuss this, how can we move forward, what can I do to assist? Which one is more acceptable? The one that put on blame or the one that works together? So you need to understand that. Yeah.
Sure. Yep. And I totally 100% agree with you, Sangeeta. There are several messages coming in here addressing on how to talk to someone who is higher than us, for example, our bosses, or someone who has a bigger power, so to speak, at a different level, especially in office environment or work environment. And I think that's a fair question. There's a lot of fear going on with that, simply because that fear comes from fear. That's what it is. But my question is, does that fear a reality, or is just a perceived fear? That's number one. And number two, does that fear really fear, or is that fear coming out from your past experiences with everyone else, but not with this person. Remember, our 6 steps covers everything and everything. And what it means is that it doesn't matter, the courageous conversation need to happen between you and your colleague, or this courageous conversation need to happen between you and your boss, for example. So fairly quickly, I just wanted to share, because there are a couple of questions about talking to someone higher position. Just a few days ago, a client came to me and wanted to have that courageous conversation with the boss. So here's the thing: when she was called in to work in this organization, she was having such a bad time with her previous boss. Of course, in a different company. She was miserable. Number one, she was so miserable. She was in the brink of bad health. She has been admitted to hospital many times. So basically, she was in such a bad shape before, until her current boss, whom that she's been befriending for quite a number of years, called up to her and said, "Hey, why don't you come and join my company?" And at that point of time, that friend of hers, let's call her Madam A, is heading a very big department, and she was on the lookout for somebody to help her with that department. So it's just like that, she make a decision. She joined this friend, Madam A, to come in. But here's the thing: Madam A isn't really a nice leader. She loves throwing stuff to her face and everybody else's face. She screams in meetings. So there was a lot of conflict at work. And after 9 months, this client of mine has decided to leave. And we had that conversation, and she said, I'm not going to tell her that she's bad towards me because I feel uncomfortable, and so on and so on. So there was one question I asked her: what is the fear? And she said, there is no fear except that she likes to throw stuff. I said, well, you can tell her not to throw stuff first, but what is the real fear? So it's not the fear of being thrown files to her face, really, but her sense of obligation towards this Madam A, because you know why? Madam A has perceivedly pick her up from the deepest pit into this new role. So she feels obligated not to offend this boss of hers. So that fear came from that perspective. So what we did was we removed that obligation feeling and just focus on the subject that really matter most, which is the overloading of work and the no respect and all that. So the conversation went around, and she realized that the only person that can control this emotion, this fear, this productivity, this health in regards to herself is herself. She cannot change her boss. The boss has been going on like that for the past 10 years. Everybody's being treated that way. There's no other time to change. So the only person that can change is her. So she decided that because of this consequences, she went to speak to her boss. 6 steps. We actually did a full script over the scenario. It was done yesterday, just yesterday, and she said, I think without the scripting, I may have go on off tangent, and I might have said, yes, I will stay, but it will, and my health will go off. I'll be sick again and again because of that fear and all that. So the 5th step, which is speaking with clarity and conviction, is coming from believing that your intention is very clear. You need to know where you come from. And Erin, your question, how did you remove that perspective from her? This is another level of realization by asking the right question. We, as human beings, we tend to ask the wrong question to ourselves and others because that's how we've been groomed. we tend to ask questions. Hey, how come you're like that? Huh? Why are you doing this? Does that sound familiar? Sangeeta, we tend to hear that all the time. Not all the time, but most of the time. I tend to kind of caught myself by saying all the time. It's not all the time. Most of the time, often. See, it's all about the narrative. It's all about the narrative. We need to ask questions where the fear comes from. And that courage needs to come from deep inside you. Now, remember, I did mention where does that intention come from? Are we doing this out of the goodness of our heart, or is the intention is going to hurt that person? You know what? We can say, hey, you know what? Since you are hurting me, it's okay. I'm going to hurt you again. But how many times are you going to do that? It's going to eat into you. So the narrative is very important. And to look at things more positive, takes a better effect on your health rather than to have toxic conversation coming from you and eats you. And that's why a lot of people are not very happy, because it's the toxicity in the mind that is always pushing us to ask all those wrong questions by using wrong words. Instead of asking, hey, how come you have body odor, you never take bath, or you tak mandi ke pagi ni? How does it come out from a friend of yours? You get offended, right? So so how do we do that? You may want to be mindful by thinking out, for example, does this person know that he has body odor, number one, and number two, might that be because of medical condition? Some of us don't know that body odor comes from medical condition, and there's no way this person can control it. There's none.
Yeah.
There's none.
Just to add on speaking with clarity and conviction, sometimes when you speak to another individual, right, they might not understand from where you're coming from, or they might not respond to that, or they might say something that might trigger you, which you feel as a personal attack. But rest assured, if you respond to that, then you are off that journey. So always remain open to what you need to address, because that person is different, you are different, and sometimes the way they say it or the approach that they use might make you angry. You know, it reminds you of your bad experiences.
Absolutely.
In the present moment, it feels that person is attacking you. That is why we say don't take things personally, because everyone speaks different languages, even though we speak English or BM or your mother tongue and all that. But when I say different language, we are not in the same wavelength. And Aaron, how do we remove the perspective? You see, it's not our control to change that person's perspective. It's our control to change our own perspective on how we view the scenario, on how we view the situation, right? If in your mind you are clear and you know what is it, your perspective will be clear. But in your mind, it's so cluttered, and when someone responds, you feel that it's attacking, then your perspective will be cluttered. So the change is not for you to change that person's perspective, but it's to change your approach. So for example, if I'm going to have a conversation with Hania, so I'll talk to her, but she still can't understand from where I'm coming from. That means my message or my approach to her need to change. So are you adaptable, right? Or are you flexible to change your approach? Because I know approach A, Hani don't really understand, so I try a different approach. I try a different way to make her understand, so that we are in constant positive conversation with open mind.
Yes. Yep. How do we change our own perspective is to understand how we respond to certain triggers. We need to know what are those triggers. It can be facial expression when we see other people's expression, or when we have some conversation. For example, me and my husband were like heaven and earth. I'm more enigmatic. My hands will go everywhere. I have expressive facial expression, whereas my husband on a different hand, whenever he's processing some input, having that conversation with him, he'll go like this, no expression. And I'm thinking, are you listening to me? And here's the thing, tend to ask, are you listening at all? Because that's how everyone else will react, right? But knowing where he comes from and knowing how I would respond to this non-facial expression, I would just check in. I would ask him, dear, are you still with me? Or I would say, what do you think? And he said, hang on, I'm thinking about what you've just said to me. There you go, boom, positive conversation instead of me accusing him not listening to me. I think that tend to happen between spouses or friends, and we tend to react instead of response and not understanding why the other person is not as responsive in the way we think they should, because we are guided by our own way of responses. We can't, because we're different. Yeah. Go ahead.
Hani, we need to fast forward a little bit.
Okay, so let me just complete the last step, which is reaching agreement. Just on the last step, reaching agreement means we need to check and balance whether the agreement has really, we're on the same page. I think that's very, very important. So 6 steps, again, practice makes it perfect. So there you go. Maybe we can go to the next slide and we'll take in questions later on towards the end of the session. Yeah? Okay. Yeah.
So the first part of emergentics is the thinking preferences. So now we go to the second part, which is the behavior preferences. Yeah. So in emergentics, you have 3 different type of behavior preferences. One is expressive, assertive, and flexibility. All right. If you are coming from this spectrum on the left, okay, these are where you are an internal process, meaning when we have conversation, you take some time to process, all right, before you voice it out. And if you're coming from the right spectrum, all right, so you are external process, meaning when you are having conversation, right, you will respond immediately. So you need to understand, when you talk about courageous conversation, you need to understand the feedback that you're getting. Okay, is this individual take some time to process what you're saying, or this person voice it out immediately to have that constant conversation? So you need to look at this also, not only from the thinking, right? You need to also understand from the behavior, and the behavior can be seen from facial expression, body language, how do they move, and these are important messages that that person is giving to you. All right.
Yep. Yep. Maybe we can walk through the next slide before. Yes. Just quickly, I'm just going to quickly share this slide on emotions versus facts. Remember, a part of our earlier slide, I talk about separating emotions versus facts, and it takes a little bit of practice to understand which one is your emotion and which one is your facts. What I did was here, I'm sharing here a guideline for you to self-check. The guideline is very simple. There are some trigger words that will make you go bonkers. For example, make you feel so sad and offended and all that. And you need to ask this question: why am I feeling this way? Why am I feeling this way? And the next one, what actual evidence do I have to support my opinion? If we think that the other person is always late, you are always late. Why do we say always late? Is is always means always, always, you know, like 10 out of 10, or always means out of the 10, 9, that person is never late, and that 1%, that one time he's late, and the response to that is we're saying, you're always late. We tend to do that. The next one is, can I reframe this situation? Can I reframe this situation? Instead of looking at things from a quick perspective, coming out from our quick responses, we need to take a step back and rethink about various scenarios. And crucial, folks, the last one, what is the real issues? Remember, some people, they just refuse to have confrontational conversation because that's how they've been groomed, that's how they grow up, and that's what their life experience is. They refuse to address the real issues. So they tend to pull all the stars, all the moons into the conversation without talking about the real issues. As a person who has kicked off this courageous conversation, very crucial to understand, to read between the lines and understand what's the real issue. Sometimes it's beyond what is being stated. It's more than that. I see a message here from Alicia. How do we educate people of the idea of responding versus reacting in conversation approach? Very good question. Reacting, I'm going to give an example. React versus respond. React sounds like this. If you go to a doctor and sometimes they knock on your knee and you have no control over that, and your knee just a boom. So that's react. There is no way to control over that that action. Versus responding, a respond means you want to react, but you catch yourself without you getting into a damaged conversation, and you actually take a step back and reassess the situation. How do we educate this? Practice. Practice, 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 because it's a skill that we can learn. It's not born out of, you know, when we come out into the world. It's being groomed into us, and because it's being groomed into us, we can train ourselves to respond instead of react. And it takes from a space of care, and that's why courageous conversation comes from the space of care. Otherwise, then it's no longer courageous conversation. It's a very damaging conversation.
Just to add on that, when you are doing the responding and reacting, if you have the time and you feel that you want to improve yourself, it's always good to journal it down. Because when you journal it down, you will have a clear perspective. You see, most of the time, when it's in our mind, we don't really see it, but we know it will happen. But when you write it down, you are using your senses even more, because now when you see it, you use your sight, and then you start writing it, you will use, you know, your sense of feel and then emotion. But when it's up here, right, you don't really use all your senses. Okay, so you need to understand, when you start to journal your emotion, when you start to journal things that you do at the end of the day, you will see a different perspective. And today, when you write something and you look at it in one way, tomorrow or the next week, when you revisit, you will look at it at different perspective.
Yep.
All right. So that is why we can't change people's perspective, because our own perspective will change according to our experience, our emotion, what we have learned. So our perspective is always changing. That is why learn, unlearn, relearn, and reinforce is very important. Because when you reinforce, you see, you know, it's not up to your expectation. That means it's yours, not others. Then you can unlearn what you have done, undo, and then redo, and then do it and reinforce. So it's a cycle that you need to
Yeah.
address.
Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
learning. It's a self-learning again and again and again, and keep on fine tune it. And I think the image that I've shared on this slide, Sangeeta, I think is very apt. We need to stop, assess, and then we need to continue whatever that works right, and stop doing whatever that is wrong, and
Yeah.
on fine-tuning those actions. The 6 steps that I've shared earlier has been proven time and again on how to address certain sensitive issues. The content might change, the audience might change, but the steps doesn't. Again, it depends on whatever scenario that you have. I think time limitation today, we cannot go in depth in the how, but do know that we will have some time to address on the how, because it is a skill. So when it is a skill, we need to practice. We actually need to do it in various scenarios. Yeah.
Yeah. And to address how do we manage or handle people who are easily triggered, right? Always ask their opinion. How you want to be communicated? How do you want things to be done? So when you get their perspective, then you understand. So it's always, if you feel that, oh, this person is so sensitive, simple thing also they get triggered and all that. So ask them how they want to be handled or managed. Then it's easier, rather than you think this is the best approach with all your experience, but the moment you hand it over and they can't address that, so ask them. All right. So with this, we will have a few more sessions to look at 7 attributes, 4 from the thinking, 3 from the behavior. We will have that series. And for all of you who feels that this is a useful session, right? A program. So we have planned our program. We will share it later on in our social media and all that. Right, you come in where we address this issue, you do the assessment so that you understand from where you are coming from, right? So that you understand from where you are coming from, how do you manage others, learn from their perspective and all that. We have charted a program, we will share it with you, and if you need more information, you can always call us or email us, okay? And wishing you all the best. Thank you for tuning in. Please share to all your network about Courageous Conversation. Yeah. Hani.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here with us today. You may connect with Sangeeta at Emerging Journey Asia, or I'm on LinkedIn. Look for me, Hani Razai Bolander. And I'm very, very grateful and feeling grateful that I get to sit in front of all of you this morning. Thank you so much, Sangeeta, for having me today.
Thank you so much. Do tune in. We have more coming up. We have workshops that we would like to share to do your profile, to understand. The most important thing is to understand yourself.
Yeah.
Only then you see, the change that you want. All right. So happy weekend. I know tomorrow you still have to work, yeah, but happy weekend. Enjoy your day. All the best. And God bless. Take care. Bye-bye. Oh, before that, can we take a video? A picture, a snapshot? Okay. If those of you who can show your face a little bit. Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you so much. All right. So I'm going to count to 3. Then I'm going to take a screenshot. Then we'll share it. Yeah. Okay. 1, 2, smile. Okay. Lovely. We'll share it and see you. God bless. Bye-bye.